Western observers look at China's wealth and assume it must follow the historical pattern of nations expanding into aggressive, conquering empires. Comparative civilization researcher He Pin offers a different framework to decode this anxiety. He argues this fear functions as a psychological projection of the West's own history of expansion. When Western powers look at a rising China, they see their own historical reflection. He Pin identifies the baseline for Western expansion as the longest-running, organized plunder in human history. This history includes British cannons forcing trade in Guangzhou and King Leopold II ordering the mutilation of indigenous people in the Congo to secure rubber exports. This primitive capital funded the construction of modern factories, universities, and parliaments, institutions eventually rebranded as the hallmarks of modernization. He Pin asks if Western nations, in China's position, would simply repeat their own violent past. He suggests the world is facing a logic that differs from the Western colonial model. China reached superpower status without blockading foreign straits, pushing opium, or imposing unequal treaties on developing nations. Influence arrived through the construction of railways, factories, and megaports. Trade logistics replaced military occupation as the primary tool of expansion. He Pin traces this restraint to an Eastern civilizational logic, the belief that a true ruler does not need to prove power through outward conquest. In Vietnam, centuries of Chinese dominance left behind cultural architecture, like this miniature Forbidden City, rather than a history of permanent military annexation. Historical texts in Korea show a similar pattern, where Chinese characters were integrated deeply into the culture, signaling influence through soft power. China used the memory of its century of humiliation to drive internal economic accumulation, rather than seeking external, violent revenge. China achieved its rise through commerce, as the international community expected, but it reached this point while rejecting the Western democratic political model. This rejection has been difficult for the Chinese elites and university students who came of age in the 1980s. They studied Jean-Paul Sartre and Western philosophy, viewing these thinkers as a roadmap for their own national development. They operated on a specific equation. Market wealth creates a middle class, which then demands and achieves a liberal democracy. This was also the strategic premise for Western theorists like Jared Diamond and Francis Fukuyama, who expected a wealthier China to embrace Western political values. Both the Chinese idealists and Western academics viewed a victory for liberal democracy as the certain outcome of China's economic growth. China achieved high-tech modernization and economic parity with Silicon Valley, as shown by its maglev and infrastructure projects. But as the economy grew, the space for political reform narrowed. He Pin describes the 1980s syndrome as the realization that China succeeded using a model that ignored Western political expectations. This outcome invalidated the foundational worldview of that generation, rendering their political theories obsolete. The 1980s generation waited for a specific Western tree to grow, but an entirely different tree emerged instead. To understand this future, the world must look past the Western lens and acknowledge the reality of the Eastern sun.